I'm going to call this meeting of the Little Calumet River Basin Development Commission to order for Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. Please set your phones and other apparatuses on stun, and let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Lambert, Happy New Year. Will you do me a favor, please, and call roll?
Tom Basin, absent. Tom Bezecki,
Here.
Anthony Roddick.
Yes.
On video. Derek Nimitz,
Here.
Dave Castellano,
Here.
Ron Ware,
Here.
Robert Ochi,
Here.
Levon Whitaker,
Present.
William Baker.
Present. All right, we have a quorum. Let's roll. Next up is the approval of the minutes from December 15th, 2021. I'll accept any motions, modifications, changes. What say you?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from December 15th of 2021.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Be there or none, Mr. Wickman, we're still doing roll call vote on things like this?
We are.
Mrs. Lambert?
Tom Bezecki,
Yes.
Anthony Roddick, Derek Nimitz,
Yes.
Dave Castellano,
Yes.
Ron Ware,
Yes.
Robert Ochi,
Yes.
Levon Whitaker,
Yes.
William Baker.
Yes. All right, they're out there for all to see on the website. Next up is the chairman's report. Happy New Year, everybody. Another one, another lap around the sun. As it relates to why we're here is to make sure things that are on and documented on that yellowing board from September 2008 don't happen again, because that's what happens if you have a $275 million man-made flood control project and don't do the maintenance to keep it doing what it's supposed to do. We're far better prepared now than we were in 2008 as it relates to handling Mother Nature. Again, remember, when we get 10 gallons of water for our 5-gallon bucket, we're going to have a problem. But we don't have as many problems as we did in 2008 because we've unified all the community within the watershed to be able to act one particular focus, and that is this economic development project. This in and of itself is generating at least $4 million a year back into the community based upon not having to pay mandatory flood insurance as a part of your federally backed mortgage. How cool is that? Appreciate everybody's help in doing this and trying to continue to make it a better project and a better body to be able to help the community as a whole. That being said, the next up thing is the finance report and the approval of the claims from January 2022. We need a motion to be able to talk about those. What say you, gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we approve the claims for January 2022 in the amount of $104,242.03.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. And a second, some discussion. Mr. Repay, anything in particular? Not a pretty light month.
It's a light month because two things. We try to get as many claims in before the end of the year, so we took an extraordinary amount of those that would have otherwise been on this agenda early. And then just a couple ones, just lawn service for walkers, which is $4,400. There's your Spluicki and Lopez with their help on the Birch Street Railroad flood control project. That was with Norfolk and Southern, and then Christopher Burke for $7,912 for the Griffith Levee rehabilitation. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. We made a donation to the wildlife education exhibit. That's the gentlemen that help us sort of monitor the levee. They trap the occasional animals that don't need to be out there and give them a forever home. So other than that, we've got some testing from Microvac, but main reason it's a little bit light is because we've taken a lot of the claims from the previous month. So we expect February to be a little bit heavier.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Repay about paying the bills? Either none. We have a motion and a second. Mrs. Lambert.
Tom Bezecki,
Yes.
Anthony Roddick, no answer. Derek Nimitz,
Yes.
Dave Castellano,
Yes.
Ron Ware,
Yes.
Robert Ochi,
Yes.
Levon Whitaker,
Yes.
William Baker.
Yes. Moving right along in a project tracker, a little update maybe, Dan, as part of this / executive director's report and kind of what's on the agenda moving forward.
Let me, if you contractor, all
Sure.
this, everything. I can tell you that both Sourman Woods and the bridge over Calumet Avenue, the pedestrian bridge, have been bid out, and they're going to be in the process of being awarded. I know the project for the Calumet Avenue, because I talked to Hammond today, the pedestrian bridge came in about $1 million over what they anticipated. So they're looking at some different ideas, but they're still going forward with it. Sourman Woods, they're concerned about it just because it seems as though all projects lately that they've bid have come out a little bit higher, even in their general paving and other contracts that they've awarded. So they're also keeping an eye on that. I don't know if we're sticking with our dollars based on that, or we're going to change it. I'm sure they're going to be looking possibly for some help, but the partnership with Lake County Parks, they issued me a report this afternoon or this morning. I have not read it over completely, but they did do some work over the winter, and they're going to submit some claims for us on that. And then the other ones mainly are all sort of still under the guise of winter and not really much going on until the weather breaks. So we're still doing projects. So we eliminated some beaver dams along the way during the months or during the days that it was possible to do it without it being iced over. The river right now is or has some ice situations, so we're going to wait. But for the most part, we were able to lower the river about 1.5 feet from roughly Grant Street to Kennedy, and that was blocking up a considerable amount of water. We went out there 3 separate times to take it out, and when we partnered with the Wildlife Exhibition Group, they were able to help us deal with the situation, and now water is running more freely. We're also getting some initial word about Kennedy Avenue. As you know, we applied for some federal dollars on that. The earmarks went away, but based on information that we're getting, the Kennedy Avenue probably will not be able to be started until 2024 for construction. So we bid it on 2023 late. That's because of a lot of the paperwork that needs to be passed through and gone through. Because it's a federal project, it will be going through, in my understanding, the NDOT process. It's not going to be an Army Corps process. For clarification, you guys at the November meeting set a deadline of February 16th for proposals for the Grant Street property to accept proposals on that 69 acres. We are going to move it to March 16th just for public purposes, because we had some paperwork situations with holidays. We're going to need to give anybody that wants to put together a proposal additional time to do so. We will be having a Griffith Golf Levy 50% review meeting on February 2nd. We'll make sure to invite those interested here on the board that would like to look over the 50% plans. I know you gave Mr. Siavash some direction as what you're looking for, so we can get that out and bid and awarded later this year. We've been awarded all of our permits for the natural spring. That's why you'll see later on the agenda, we'll be able to go ahead and rebid that project and finish it this summer. And then we acquired 3 additional properties that the Army Corps has requested. We got those through tax sale. It's a little bit of a long process, bless you. But we finally did it. We're just going to run some final title work on it, which is required by the Corps, and then which will show us as being the owner. So we just have to go through that process. We are working, as I've mentioned, with Lake County Parks and the partnership, dealing with the Autobahn and making sure that they're doing work. And I know Derek is doing work on DNR is doing work on the Hobart Marsh, since that's been turned over in October, and then we're still going to do a formal agreement with DNR. But for the time being, they're still doing work on it just so it makes sure it doesn't go back to seed or a bad situation. And we've spent a considerable amount of money out there. And then finally, I guess we're going to do some structural and geotechnical study of a landslide drainage ditch that's located between Calhoun and Klein, just so that we can do a report and check to make sure there's no deficiencies, and then issue that report to the board if there's any deficiencies. So I don't see anything else on my list unless my contacts are fooling me. We have four presentations today that you will see that have all been through the advisory board. They're in no particular order besides, I guess we went through it that way. Town of Griffith has one, Town of Maryville has two, and then the Town of Dyer has one. And so each one of those will present to you tonight. And as I've told all of them, generally, you guys don't make a decision on the same night as the proposals. You'll review it, and maybe a decision will be in the future. So I'll let each one of the presenting bodies give their presentation when you feel necessary, and then we'll go from there.
All right, thank you. Before we start that, gentlemen, any questions, comments about what's going on in the field as we start the new year for Mr. Repay? Leon, next, Wishlinski. Okay, let's start with your presentations, Mr. Repay. Please introduce that. If you're making presentations today, please be cognizant, get to the point, see what we're doing, hit what the highlights are that I'm sure Mr. Repay is went over, and let's try to make this a better place to live.
So the first one will be the Town of Griffith, which is the Katy Marsh ditch diversion sewer intake. This was built as a federal flood control project, but not our federal flood control project. And very much like our federal flood control project, there was no funding source to deal with the ongoing operation and maintenance of it. So this has a, I guess, more direct and some indirect impact on our system and the way it was designed. And I think Andy here, Andy Rabb, will be here to discuss that, and he will go through his presentation, and we'll leave it at that.
All right, everything's all set up. You guys are teched up. Please introduce yourself and have at it, gentlemen.
All right, I'm Andy Rabb with the Town of Griffith. This is Dennis Benoit, who's our engineer from HRC Engineering. So we thank you for your time, and I know your time is valuable, so we'll try to go through this as quickly as can. Before I get to Dennis and the quick presentation, I've been on board for Griffith just for about 7 or 8 months. I'm the Public Works Director. So when I walked into one of the first things I looked at was the failing raker and the system, the problem we're having with cleaning over at the ditch. I saw guys during the June rain events. Guy got hurt with a rotor cuff injury trying to get debris out of there. Another guy hurt his back. Another guy fell into the water. It's an extreme safety hazard, especially during heavy rain events. We're trying to use backhoes and other equipment that's caused a lot of damage, and it's becoming a big problem. We had flooding at the big rain event in June where we had almost 9 inches of rain. We'll have some pictures that will show a little bit of that, but it's an extreme safety hazard for our associates, and trying to do it with a backhoe and other ways just doesn't work. So that's why we're here today to ask for your help with that. That being said, we'll get to the presentation, and Dennis, if you can go through that, please.
Okay, I'm just gonna give you a little background on the overall lay of the land. You guys probably know a lot more about this project than we do. But, you know, this is a 10-foot diameter short storm sewer. It provides a shortcut from the Katy Marsh ditch to the Little Cal River, lowers the hydraulic grade line. It basically allows all that flow from Griffith in the southeast to go north and east without having to go all the way over to the Hart Ditch. This is basically a map showing that the shortcut versus the yellow line. It's about a little over a mile long versus going about 5.5 miles. So this has a significant effect on the hydraulic grade line at the Little Cal River where the Hart Ditch intersects, as you probably all understand from this in the past. The chronology of the problems that the town has had in 2010, the sewer and intake were
I guess, and then about a year later, the Corps installed this mechanical traveling rake, which you see there. It's that long thing with the boom. And in 2012 and 2014, the town had problems with this. And there's a variety of issues of why this thing did not work properly that I found out in the course of doing this study. And I don't think we want to go through all that. But long story short is that it doesn't work. They've had numerous problems with it. And since about 2014, the town has basically given up on trying to keep this thing operational. Went back to a manual raking with a backhoe that was parked on the street behind this trash rack. Well, needless to say, that plastic or fiberglass rack that was originally installed didn't last very long with that kind of activity. And so it basically, the original rack was replaced with a very robust metal galvanized steel rack, and it's still in place and it's still very robust, very and can withstand a lot of shock. And it's very well engineered, well designed for its purpose. But with the manual raking, as Andy alluded to here earlier, that with there's high velocity currents into the sewer because this is built right at a weir. So there's about a 10-foot drop behind the weir, and so water rushes through there. And in the past, some of the guys have had to actually stand in front of the rake to pull large objects away from the front of the rack during rainstorms. It becomes very tricky, and it's a safety issue. And I don't know if you want to say something more about that.
I don't have a picture of it, but guys, when the water's to the top of the bridge and it's 5 feet plus deep in a current, guys were in waders trying to get things out of there, getting pushed, and it was just so unsafe. I had to stop the practice the minute I saw it. And then we're back to trying to do this, and then the guy hurt his rotator cuff, and they're trying to ropes and buckets and rakes, and I got a couple pictures, but unfortunately I don't have a bunch of them. So it's just an extreme problem, and it's just not safe. And we know it's valuable. It's a great thing that was done to create that waterway to help the flooding, but we got to be able to keep it. We got to be able to keep it clear. And the rake just never worked. It was rebuilt 3 different times, sent back to the manufacturer. It just doesn't work. That is one of the options you would have seen that we presented. We could try to fix it again. There's just not a lot of confidence. Why it's the lowest cost, there's just not a lot of confidence that will continue to work. And with the solution that you've got, go ahead and go into that.
And needless to say, when they can't rake it fast enough, it backs up on the street, as you can see from that last picture, very rapidly, and it's starting to flood the streets. This is just some of the costs that have been incurred because of the inadequate original design. Is that the rack was replaced at a cost of about $300,000 in 2019 thereabouts. And then the town has been incurring additional costs because of having this backhoe available on demand to continue to rake clean the rack during storms. For a while, it was actually parked out there, but it's actually usually trucked in when needed. So that's what the costs that have been being incurred are. This is a picture of the backhoe cleaning the rack. Because of the high velocities of the flow going through this rack, it actually pulls the material down onto the rack. So that's part of the reason why this manual raking it wasn't really well thought out to begin with. It's just too much force for a couple guys to pull a large debris up.
Just out of curiosity, who designed this again?
This was the Army Corps.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a study, and we looked at 3 different alternatives. And in the course of looking at that mechanical rack, we found out that the original design, and I talked to the manufacturer of this rake, and they had a lot of problems. And part of the problem that they had with the original design engineer is that the rack was designed at a different angle than what their boom operates at. So as you rake this thing up the slope, the boom angle had to continually change. Well, that turned out to be a radically different departure from what they normally do. They normally design the boom to work on the same plane so it doesn't have to change its angle as it breaks up the slope. So we would have to do some significant changes to the existing rack to make that work. And then and that alternative, which is the far left there, is roughly, we determined about 660,000. But there's two problems with selecting that alternative. One is you still only have one machine to clean 5 racks. So the one machine goes down, during a storm, you're still stuck with the same situation you are today. You have no redundancy. Both of those other 2 alternatives that we looked at puts an independent machine on each rack. So we've got 5 times the redundancy, if you will, or 4 times the redundancy if the first one goes out. But basically, we looked at 2 different alternatives. The middle one there, which is the back clean screen, is not a very good engineering solution, in my opinion, because it's raking up the back of the screen, and because of the clearance involved, it still involves rearranging, repositioning this rack that's already out there drastically. The last version only requires a very minor adjustment of that rack angle to fit the machine that we've proposed, which is basically a track machine. And I've got some pictures of it here on some of the following pages. This is a better view of how that track machine would work. This is a machine that the company that we've been talking to provide this has provided this type of machine on numerous dam installations where the rack is usually a little steeper and goes down into the water. This is a little different because we're cleaning the rack right at the crest of a weir. And the weir is there for hydraulic purposes, basically to keep the water in the ditch. We don't want it all draining into the sewer and all going that way, because then we probably pull heart ditch backwards. But that's an engineering issue that I don't know if we have time to get into. But the other things we have to do to accommodate this, we have to upgrade the power to 480 volt 3-phase. We have to provide site security fencing with this kind of machine working out there. There's no security fencing right there today. So we obviously got to keep kids and innocent bystanders from accidentally walking over there when this thing starts up. And then we got a conveyor and a commercial dumpster. This is a view of the machine that we're proposing. This is a dam installation. This would be very similar to what we're proposing here. The beauty of this machine is that we can put it on the existing rack. It's basically independent of that rack. And since there's already a very robust rack there, those bars are roughly 6 inches high and half an inch wide. So they're very hefty steel rack. This is a breakdown of the cost opinion of the recommended alternative, the manufacturer's equipment, and we've had numerous discussions with them. So this is a good number here for 5 machines plus a conveyor and a control panel and level sensors to basically make this whole thing operational. The rest of these costs are electrical. We've got level sensors and control wiring that are needed because you've got to sense when the level is coming up, because then it would turn the rakes on and have them start raking. Fencing and security. The power upgrade, we had some back and forth with NIPSCO to determine their costs and then we have to, because we're changing the site voltage, we have to put some transformers in there to accommodate all the existing site lighting. We've got street modifications to accommodate the dumpster. We got to shift the curbing around a little bit to accommodate this dumpster we're going to put on site, and a dumpster pad. And then and then this mechanical equipment installation will be basically the mechanical contractor that installs that equipment on the top line. And then engineering, design, and construction, I've got 15% in there as just sort of a placeholder. We have not submitted a proposal or anything to the town yet to firm that number up, but it would be in that range or perhaps less. And then contingencies, we put a 10% contingency. One of the questions that was posed originally was that, well, how firm is this number? We don't have hard bids, we don't have hard plans and specs, but that would be the next step to get to this hard number of 1.76 million. So I think that's pretty much it. If you want to go back to the look at the breakdown.
Oh, we'll go back on pretty much a lot of it. So
Okay.
let's bring it to the board as far as questions on this particular project. Who wants to go first? Okay, Mr. Whitaker.
Just very briefly, back to your slide on, let's see. So we didn't like redact any calls from the previous company that actually did the work. We didn't get any compensation or anything. I'm assuming the fact regarding the fact that it was only in service for less than 4 years.
So did we get money back from the original manufacturer of the rake?
Yeah, I think it was a credit or.
No, that was,
Did they say that they were?
that was back in 2020, that was back over 10 years ago.
Okay,
And then, so when we hit, that's the proposal one, when we asked them to revisit
Mhm.
and give us a cost to fix and update it today. They claimed they were giving us this great price to try to make it right from when it was wrong back then.
Okay.
But no, we haven't got any
okay.
compensation. We had to pay to ship it to them back when it was in 2012 and then bring it back. And so,
Okay.
no.
The slide we had, that may be in the bottom right picture. The title of the other, that's it. Okay, maybe it's on the next page.
Yeah, this is
So,
just
yeah,
the
so
recommended
that's-
alternative.
So the existing one is 57.1, I believe, that was in the packet, and I think you're proposing like a 30-degree angle. For the, what would it would be for the to ride from what, east to west? So your angle is going to change from 57 down to 30 in order to accommodate not being caught up.
Well, the existing angle is pretty much what it is there on the far right today.
Okay, right.
That's pretty close to the existing angle. We got to change it slightly. We may have to change it 1 or 2 degrees just because there's some obstacles at the very top. So to have it rake cleanly up, and then it's got to rake up and go onto a plate and then drop onto something. So we have to make it clear that. So we have to do a slight change. And as you can see, that's probably the least change of all 3. The other 2 have to be much steeper to work.
Okay.
And that translates into cost, additional cost to move all that heavy structural steel around.
Okay. The last question I have for now is, you said a lot of dam projects use that type of a design. Anything locally that we might be able to envision seeing that may be comparable?
I don't know. I'd have to quiz the manufacturer on that one. Most of the dam projects that they've done are down in the New Orleans area, big dams and out west. So I can find out. Actually, this type of machine on the far right is actually used in wastewater treatment plants a lot too, for the same purpose, raking stormwater screens and sanitary screens. And there's actually one that was just recently put in, I worked on over at the Hammond Sanitary District. So,
Okay.
so that's pretty local.
Close enough, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. What I got-
Yeah, I'll jump on that question just as an aside with regards to other locations where this rack system or rake cleaning system has worked. If it's stormwater plants, just on where they've done 5 like this and how that activity would relate to what you're going to anticipate at this location.
Okay, I can get you some references.
And then the other thing before I let it for these other guys, just for me, an overall site plan of that location and where you're planning on setting all of the new transformers, the pad, the equipment, all those types of things, just to try to give an idea of how that's gonna look. One of the concerns I have is just that how much fencing do we need there? And then Mr. Repay, how long have we been funding or helping to fund maintenance on this federal project?
Since it's failed in what, 13, I believe is your record say it. The $300,000 that they alluded to in one of those slides was actually a reimbursement by the federal government, to Levon's point. When there was the declaration of a federal disaster, they came in and they repaired that. Unfortunately, we thought they were gonna repair the entire thing. They just repaired the grates. That was money that was the federal government. So we've not gotten anything. And as the court usually does when they turn over projects, although this isn't our federal project, it's Griffith's. Once they turn it over to you, as you know, you assume everything, whether right, wrong, or different.
And it would be helpful if, however this thing moves forward, whatever type of maintenance plan that would be associated with all this new equipment and the estimates of that, and who's gonna pay for that, please. Thank you. All right, gentlemen, sorry.
That question is
Mr. Ochi.
similar to yours, Chairman. Annual maintenance costs, I think you just covered that, but useful life of these rakes, do you have an idea of what the useful life of these things are? Have you had any history of it?
This type of machine should easily last for 25 years. It's a fairly robust
Like
piece
The
of.
previous ones?
Hmm?
Like the previous ones?
Well,
25 years is a long time. For something.
yeah.
And the application maybe go back to the original statement you made. The original ones failed because of design or maintenance or both, a combination of both.
Well, I guess in my opinion, I'd say it's probably mostly design fault
Okay.
because of as I explained.
So can you
the
ensure us
angle-
that this application is going to maintain and provide the intent of this rating system?
Yes, I would, put my
And
reputation
these,
behind
you
it.
said these are in water treatment plants where we have very low current, right? You're basically taking sediment and moving it away from a screen. You said one of the problems with this is you had a major drop off behind the screen. We have added hydraulic pressure at high points in the rain.
Right, well,
Will these things work at that point?
they will. In fact, the installation at Hammond has a much higher velocity than this rack does. It 24/7 basically because of the way that it's positioned in the channel. It's basically at a point where it's falling into their pump station. So it's in a similar kind of arrangement as this.
It would be too much to ask if the engineer of record could write some kind of recommendation that they are stating today that this system will work as intended. Would that be applicable for this plan? Or have we typically done it?
Because because it was a federal project, we weren't involved in it. And I don't imagine Andy being involved in it. Because Andy's relatively new. So it would be something that they would have to request from the Corps with because there was always update meetings on this construction meetings. You would have to get anything minutes, documentation, and as-built from the Corps, which town may have, but the Corps certainly has because this was a federal project.
Okay.
I don't know, do you have the as-built on how this was done and this? I don't know.
I have some of it, yes.
So that's where you would get it from. But it's just, and the way they do it, the way the Corps does it is they just turn over the project. And, to your point, when they said, the manufacturer said, look, my boom wasn't designed to do this. I'm sort of surprised that they still continued with it, but it isn't surprising that they've done this type of project.
The notes I have on that, Dan, are that I'm trying to remember the engineer that the Corps had involved with it as well, Black and Beach. According to this manufacturer, they raised those concerns with Black and Beach, the Corps had, and of course, it no, it would work as it is. And I don't know, it's a he said, she said kind
Well,
of
I just
thing.
said that it didn't work. Because you had two other applications.
It has never worked so long as I've been here, and that's almost
So
11
can we
years.
get some kind of letter of guarantee? Not guarantee, but that this system that you're proposing is going to.
I'd like to see that too.
Obviously, we'll have, some warranties from the manufacturer on equipment and things, but yes, we'll try to.
Yeah, I think they might provide something along those lines. What term of length of time is,
Or maybe we get extended warranty. Something like that.
Anything else, Mr. Oji?
No.
Mr. Nimitz?
Just a few questions. Currently, it gets cleaned manually, either by a backhoe or individuals pulling stuff out. How often does that occur? I understand that you're putting people in harm's way.
It happened, we do
Sure.
it, sorry. We do it weekly. We do it every week. Obviously during major rain events, it's, a lot more time and energy where we're literally down there all the time. So, in June, when we had almost 9 inches of rain, we were there literally almost 24 hours a day for 3 straight days. And we were monitoring because we had trees, we had tires, we had all kinds of stuff that were blocking that thing. The water was up to the bridge. Like I said, I had only been on the job a couple of weeks. I come in and I'm watching guys and waiters, and they're all almost falling under the bridge, trying to get this debris out. Got them out of there right away. I go, this is, somebody's gonna crack their head or drown. So those are obviously in a time like now, it's not that bad. But that's why I have an estimate of what it cost us in a range. I had to go back history-wise, anywhere from 45,000 to 100,000, depending on how many major rain events we had.
But anytime you have a major rain event, we have one, you have to man that particular location.
Yes.
I mean, this is definitely a project that working together, thank you for that, 'cause that's not easy.
The important thing to remember is that this is an open ditch, so the bag from Menards could end up there, and then as soon as that gets into this grate that they have, which the openings aren't large at all, so everything just compiles. You've got grass clippings, you've got, he said tires, I don't doubt that. Everything will go in here.
So during all the history that we have as far as events, does that continue to be a focal point of concern?
Certainly for that area, absolutely. For us, particularly on the river, it doesn't bother us as much unless it gets blocked and then it sort of shifts the water down to Hart's Ditch. This is designed.
And brings Katy Marsh up, and that brings the Boulevard and Kennedy Avenue into play.
It
And
is designed to relieve the water off of Hart's Ditch technically, and to give it a more of a shortcut.
yeah, that's not working.
Another follow-up, if that's okay. I understand that some apprehension, or I guess what I'm hearing is apprehension to rehabilitate the existing raker based on previous experiences. Which is the lowest cost.
Mhm.
The proposed front clean screen, which is that middle cost, there's 5 different apparatuses. And one of them may fail, or multiple ones may fail at some point during some storm, a big log, something. But the way that it's designed with that front screen is there's no way to bring in a backhoe and scrape those clean. Am I understanding that correctly? So the design is there's an apparatus, a raker on top of the grates currently, would be proposed. And if that failed, there isn't an easier way to remedy that as an emergency.
well, there is a way, and this would not be normal operation, but you
Right.
could actually pull this whole thing is like a big chain, big links. And you can actually pull it all out of the way and get to the rack if something huge were to come in there, like a tree branch that just, but this machine, there's some videos of it online where you can see like large objects being taken away. Because this whole chain sort of pivots out of the way, and it can pull some very large objects off of there. It's designed for that. So the occasion when that would happen would be pretty rare, I would guess. But in response to your question, could a backhoe still get in there? The answer would be yes. It would just take some effort to do that, to remove something really large if it got stuck for some reason. But like we said, with 5 machines, we've got some redundancy, so, maybe 2 or 3 of them would keep working if a big object came in and blacked 2 of them or something. And that, as far as I understand and looking at the hydraulics, I think if you had 3 out of 5 racks clean or being clean during a rain event, you probably still wouldn't have any flooding. It's hard to say with, depending on the rate of rainfall and all that, but, it would definitely, the chances of problems would be a lot less. And that's the other reason for going away from that traveling raker, because it's only one machine traveling up and down, cleaning about a 2.5 foot wide swath at a time. So it has to go back and forth numerous times to clean the whole thing.
But we can't control, or is it set up to sort of control distribution of trash independent of each rack?
Well, not really. It's just looking at the level in the ditch, and as the level gets up, you'll start raking them all. There's nothing wrong with just running this machine. It doesn't consume a lot of energy. It's basically just something you want to stay ahead of things when it is raining.
Yeah. So we would have to get a feel for different rain events and set the level at a certain place.
Yeah, you could do that, but it's such an easy machine and such a low energy use that it's probably better just turn it on and let them run.
Okay.
During any kind of a rise in the ditch.
Cool.
Yeah, although I know you, the design is great because there is the redundancy. Of course, there's an added cost because we have to maintain now more units as well. But the reliability, it increases our reliability. Okay.
Mr. Wisniewski.
All right, you guys are asking for 1.7 or 80% of that. And you're basing this on basically engineer's estimate numbers. What happens if it comes in over that?
The question is that, you're asking for 80% of the 1.7 based on an engineering estimate. What happens for overages?
So I guess I can't speak for in particular the town council. I'm sure we would be willing to, pay some portion of the overage, but I can't, give you an exact number and speak for them. Understanding that it was higher, and we'd have to discuss that. I'm sure we would, obviously be willing to pay our portion of higher costs.
That's just something to add to the thought process with the maintenance.
Yeah.
I mean, we're asking basically at this point to fund a certain portion. Would it be better to ask for the engineering at this point and get that done? And I'll follow that up real quick with what's the timetable on, obviously you've done some schematic things to get the final engineering drawings ready to go for a pricing bid.
Yeah, so obviously the preliminary engineering we've been paying for, the town has been paying for to get to this point. Before we wanted to go a whole lot further, we wanted to see if we had a funding mechanism and before we spend a lot more money. And then potentially not do anything. So that's kind of got us to this point. We have talked to the Army Corps as well. And amongst other things that we've talked to the Army Corps about, they of course are now our great source of help. And if they did try to tack this on to another project, you're probably looking at the cost going up, 40, 50% higher.
If they're involved.
If they're involved. So
And then what's it, assuming that you guys would get a green light, what can we go over just a guesstimate of a timetable here? Engineering, bidding, construction, completion?
I would assume about 3 months of design, 3 to 4 months of design, and then I don't know how long it takes to go through the process here.
Say a year, Tom.
Yeah, 3 to 4 months to get to here, and then I don't know if it were bid through the town, I would assume it would take another month or two to get bids. And then, so we'd probably be bidding sometime this year in 2022, mid to third quarter, I'd say.
That'd probably be the earliest. But you may very well be right. I mean, you're probably looking at a minimum of 6 months. Could be anywhere from 6 months to a year.
Okay. Just as a point of reference, as far as the engineering of this deep tunnel, I think the deep tunnel was put in, and then we came back a few years ago, Bill, and worked with the town because the increased flow of the water basically washed out the embankments on either side of the old bridge because they didn't account for any kind of riprap or anything. Everything was washed out, and I think didn't we end up, everything's concrete going west from the rack to
Yeah, in the picture, it's all concrete.
yeah.
Was that part
And
of
that
the project we worked on?
Yeah, that was part of the rebuilding of Katy March ditch or Arbogast Bridge because of the increased flow washed out the entire bridge embankment.
We give the town $50,000 to maintain this segment of the system on a regular basis, so long as they pass the inspection. So what they use the $50,000 for, there's really no set hard fast, it just has to be done.
I understand. Anything else, Mr. Wishlinski?
That's all I got.
All right, anybody else, gentlemen?
Yes, I have some questions.
Yes, sir, Mr. Gazdecki.
In your alternative number 3 description, you indicate the trash rack angle would essentially remain unchanged from the current angle, and then you have in parentheses 30. What is the current angle? 30 something?
I believe it's 36.5 degrees. It's some real oddball angle, like, yeah.
So where it says from the current angle, so it's kind of from the current angle of 36.5 degrees, period, right? Is that what I'm looking at here?
Yes. But there is,
Not
as I
to
mentioned,
60 degrees, we're not changing the
No.
angle.
no, not significantly. We do have to do a couple, we have to raise the top end.
It says 30
About
degrees
4
is
inches.
the recommended for your, at least in one of these, in the full SCT system, it says 30 degrees, angle of installation.
Yeah,
It
that
also says on the flex rate only, optimum 30 degrees up to 45.
yes, and they can even go steeper than that. So,
Second question I have for you, what is the capacity or the proposed capacity of the first option, the rake itself, and the equipment to modify and put on a new rake? What's the capacity of that rake
I mean,
as far as pounds?
I don't know what that is off the top of my head. I'd have to look and see what, they don't typically rate these based on the weight of the material they can remove, but there
What's the
probably is-
largest
there
item
probably
you've
is
had to
some.
remove from that rack?
They've removed tires, they've removed 55-gallon drums,
So no large logs or anything like that?
large logs. There's videos of, a lot of material that they've removed from these, using these machines. So they're fairly robust.
So you're aware that the capacity of what you're proposing is 1,000 pounds?
It's probably more than that. Is that what it
It
says
says
there?
1,000 pound debris lifting capacity for the flex rake only.
Okay, that's probably because of the limitation of the rake blade itself, because, it's 10 feet wide, basically.
So you don't think that that'll be an issue?
I don't think so. I mean, I've seen what's being pulled off of there now. For the most part, 90% of the time, it's usually there's marsh grasses and debris. And it's like, as Dan described, it sort of maps up on the top and then plugs everything behind it, and it just builds from there. Whereas if you're removing it continually, you stay ahead of it.
So but the clearance from the bottom of the rack or the new raking equipment to the top of the screen is 2 inches. How will you accommodate debris that's not 2 inches thick to get caught by the
Well,
upswing?
This machine is actually designed to pivot up away from the rack when large objects come through. The whole thing is that top drive motor is on a big pivot, a swinging
Right.
pivot. So it can actually move up and the chain can actually lift right off. Because the weight, the gravity helps keep this thing down onto the rack. So it doesn't use a sprocket or anything like some types of.
Okay,
mechanical
so
devices.
we have 2 inches, top of the screen here, right, and the bottom of the mechanism. How are you gonna accommodate something that's less than 2 inches, like marsh grass, is gonna accumulate on top of there?
Oh, no, it doesn't, it engages right onto the rack. So it actually rides on the rack itself, but when there's little or no debris on there, and actually will scrape the bars right up to the top, so.
So that will be metal on metal?
It'll be metal and, actually they use metal and then they alternate between metal and,
Titanium.
like a high density polyethylene material. So they minimize, they're trying to minimize the wear on the rack.
So the bars themselves have some type of Teflon or some type of something,
The
that spacer is,
The rake blade itself is made of I forget what that material is, a very high density polyethylene material. So that's what causes the slip. And then the rake is actually, or the rack, and the stationary rack is actually galvanized steel. So you don't want to scrape that too many times.
I'm still confused. Are you leaving the existing rack in place?
Yes.
So you're gonna be putting this raking equipment that you're showing, do you have your proposal?
Here, let me show you something here.
Because the equipment I'm looking at doesn't match the descriptive that you're giving me, at least not to me visually.
Okay. You see
I
this?
see gaps
You
there.
see this picture here? Look at the picture and not necessarily the illustration, but that's a picture of the blades that go across, and they are carried by this chain. And there's these rollers on the side, which basically keep the top set of chain links from collapsing down onto the lower. And the reason why they have, like, I think they have 3 rollers there, is basically because they got such a long length of chain. That's the return chain, if you will. And so the one that goes up the slope is the one that actually engages with the rack and pulls the material up the slope and drops it down behind the rack. So those are actually those polyethylene racks, I believe. One's polyethylene, I think, and they got every so often they put a stainless steel one in just to make sure they get a good scrape on the rack. But what happens with these things is what happens with these things is the polyethylene sort of works into the steel, and actually it wears a little bit over time, but it's a fairly hard plastic material.
Mr. Gozdecki?
That answers my question. If you feel that rake rests and travels on the existing bar screen, you shouldn't have a problem.
Where do you see it? It says 1,000 pounds.
Looking at,
Hey, Dan,
where we say
Why they
flex
look at that?
rake only, I think if you go to the back of the
is the flow
proposal.
enough for ice not to come on in this particular location, or is it ice up there?
I have not seen ice. You've probably seen it more often than I have.
The surface ices, and I anticipated a little bit of that, but we would probably design this one so that the blades wouldn't rest in the water, they wouldn't stop in the water, so that they could continue raking. when they turn it on.
No, but I was thinking if any of that equipment, should you get there, say below the water line when it freezes, it's gonna tear up all your stuff.
Yeah, I thought of that specifically, and I think that we would design it so that the brake blades would not sit down in the water. They would sit either back up the rack or up here,
Yeah.
so that we could.
That's why I like hanging out with Purdue and Rose, Hillman folks, because they work on that kind of math to make sure that we're not tearing up the equipment because of ice, because it freezes here once in a while.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
We had the same questions and concerns.
Thank you. Any other questions, gentlemen?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Ware.
So here you go, Mr. Chairman. The note says for sites with freezing conditions, a dead plate heat pad and WC heat trace wrap accessories are recommended and not included.
Well, that's for the upper part of the rack, and I don't think that particular statement is applicable in this particular case. Because this thing will run in cold weather. And I think your concern, Bill, was more related to the freezing of the ditch, which does happen. But I was just out there today looking at it, and it was pretty cold today, and it's got an ice skin on top of it. But right around the spillway, there's actually areas where it's not frozen. But in order to accommodate that frozen ditch, I would not want the machine to actually stop in the water. I want to stop it above it, or, so that the blades are not sitting in the water. None of the moving parts are stuck in the water or stuck in the ice.
Understood. Mr. Ware.
On that point, wouldn't there be a gear or a return at the bottom of the rake system that would then be exposed to the water in the wintertime?
No, it's just the rake or the chain links, if you will. And all of those could be sitting above the water line, the way it is. Because the normal water level over that spillway is only about 3 inches or less during normal times. And when it starts to flow in, obviously the ice is going to come up, but this thing would scrape right over the ice.
The unit that you mentioned that is in operation, you said at Hammond, how long has that unit been in operation?
Well, that particular one has only been in operation for about 2 years now, so.
No issues with that,
No
with
issue.
the customer?
No,
And you said the water flow rate there is higher than what you anticipate or expect here?
oh, yeah, yeah. It rushes through there 24/7.
I'm sorry, I have one more.
Absolutely.
On the maintenance that was discussed about, getting an idea on who will be responsible for the possible maintenance in the future, do the blades have to be changed after so many hours in operation? Does the manufacturer have recommendations for that?
I don't, they
That
may
part.
have some recommendation on that, but I don't know what it is. I know that this is in a lot of treatment plants where it's running continuously. This would not be running continuously, and they go for many, many years without having to change the blades. I'll see if I can get an answer on that too.
Cool. Anything else, gentlemen?
Yeah, if you could also check on the freezing conditions on the site, and what kind of expense that might entail.
Okay. And I'll send you that video of it removing large.
Just send it to
objects.
me. I'll
Yeah,
just send it.
I'll send it all to you.
Sure.
I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I just heard something
Mr.
at the very
Broadbent.
end there. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just heard something at the very end where you said we wouldn't be running it continuously, but you add the cold weather conditions to that. Would that create a problem with not running it continuously? Like parts, maintenance of parts, just moving parts that aren't running. It might be easier on the maintenance program if it actually is running continuously. So if ours isn't, with our weather, would that be an issue or a concern for you?
Well, we could have it run continuously during wet weather or during freezing conditions, but I don't know if it would be necessary or not.
Okay.
As I said earlier, we could design it to just stop out of the water zone, and so that it's not parked in that frozen pond layer. If you look at the illustration drawing on this particular, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not.
Yeah, I actually can.
Okay, you see how the water level would be about right here. So all
So
of this.
basically, all the moving
all
parts
this
are above
thing
the water
coming
line.
Out of the water, basically.
I got you. Okay.
So
Thank
but it anchors inside of the water then though, or does the whole thing stay on the actual racking system and none of the supports go into the water itself?
As the rake makes its arc around to the bottom, it'll just about scrape the spillway.
Yeah, no, my question is, sir, is that there's nothing that a pylon or a piling going into the water to support it from the bottom. It's
No.
all supported from the top.
It's supported from the rack,
Thank you.
basically.
Mr. Broadnex, you good?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlemen? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, for helping with this and for all the help the town of Griffith gives us in this very important part of the system.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
Back to you, Mr. Repay.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the town of Maryville. I'll give it to Mr. Matt Lake. He can do some brief introductions. I don't know if Frank is gonna do the presentation for Kaiser Ditch, but Matt, I'll give it to you and then you can take it from there.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we have volume.
Okay. That's what I
Okay.
figured.
We're all old, Mr. Lake, so the more that you could elevate your tone, it would be helpful.
Okay. Before you is our Kaiser Ditch East Tributary Flood Control Improvements Project. I don't know if you can see my share screen or at this point.
And then just do me a favor too, since we're recording this, Mr. Lake, introduce yourself and what you do and all that good stuff, because you know this is kind of quasi-government thing.
Yes. My name is Matt Lake. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryville Stormwater Utility, and I run the day-to-day operations of the stormwater utility for the town of Maryville. And before you have a set of plans, if you could see it on the screen. I want to thank the commission because you guys have funded 50% of the engineering costs for this particular project. So I do want to thank you guys for that. So the plans are actually completed. The scope of the work for this project entails replacement of 4 culverts at intersections along Taney Place at 73rd, 77th Avenue, 78th Avenue, and 79th Place. Ultimately, this area is a highly populated residential area. All the work would be done within the right-of-way and existing drainage easements. As I previously mentioned, you guys had funded 50% of the cost of the engineering. All we have pending is some permitting, a 401 and 404 permit, and then we'll be ready to put it out for bid. We're asking for, well, the engineer's estimate is $690,000. We're asking for 50% of that, which is $345,000. And just to let you know that our 50% will be coming from American Rescue Plan dollars. So this is also part of our stormwater master plan, as well as your watershed comprehensive plan. Ultimately, this tributary drains from US 30 down to 73rd Avenue, east of Taney, and then converges with Kaiser Ditch, and then runs into Calumet Park Cemetery from there. So it drains drains northward into ultimately into Turkey Creek, main stem of Turkey Creek. And with me today is Frank Stewart from DLZ. He did a lot of the engineering on this project. And Frank, I don't know if you have anything to add or you want to just dive into questions.
I will give you the brief rundown, and actually what I'd like to do is show you a picture or two, and I have to pull it up.
Are we able to see their screens or no? Okay.
Can you see this? Are you able to see this picture of the
Red dots.
Okay, these are the locations of the culverts. They were originally studied back in 2014 under the master plan of the town of Maryville. And so we're just fulfilling that. They actually will be able to impact, got to load, there we are. This part of the ditch will impact primarily the upper part of the watershed and these homes here by relieving the flow through here. What's interesting, and you look in your package, you'll see that there is should be a table, and see if I can stop sharing and then find that table. But these things are the changes in the culvert. Like at the very bottom end here at 74th, we're going from like 4 24 inches to 3 3x5 boxes. That's how bad the restriction has been in there. So in the name of brevity, I will kind of leave it at that and open it up to questions.
This is, Bill, as it relates to the culverts, and you say they're undersized, is that what that statement was?
That is correct.
Now, I'm assuming they're clogging. Is there any pictures or whatnot of those culverts and kind of having some idea just for context? Because some of us went to IU and I can't necessarily always picture in my mind what you're trying to describe to me.
Yes, let me see if I can stop share this
Are
one.
those Mr. Lake, are those culverts a part of your ongoing maintenance throughout the system?
Yes, they are. It's not a regulated drain. So it is our responsibility to maintain those culverts. And as you can imagine, over the years, you know, with the street departments before the utility existed, they modified things and didn't help matters much. So we're trying to put things back to a situation where it's hydraulically functional for that particular area.
All right, are we on the screen again?
Yeah, I'll see that I get.
This is the 73rd culvert. So you have 4 culverts that will be replaced, and they're small. They're going to be replaced with 3x5 boxes. Then we continue on. 3 foot by 5. And then we continue on. This is 77th Avenue. And this is 77th up here. In the meantime, actually in this picture back up here at 73rd, you see the town was doing some maintenance on the ditch at the time I took these pictures. And continue on. This is 77th, the single culvert. This will be replaced with 2 3x5 boxes. And continuing on, this is 78th. Again, be the 2 3x5 boxes or so, I believe, in that one. And the trickier one was up here at 79th place. This is a very small pipe. It doesn't show well in here, but it's like and they originally proposed, this is enclosed through here. The original master plan proposed opening it up, but you can see the proximity of the residences. And after discussions, the town said, let's keep it enclosed. And so we had some trouble. Instead of the original proposed inlet, we had to go to a 4x4 or 3x4 boxes here in order to keep the clearance on the roadway, which is, I don't have one of those handy, but as it goes under there and still make the inlets. Does that answer your question?
Do you have easements for all of this?
Yes, there are easements currently platted.
Thank you. Gentlemen, questions?
Yeah, I have
Mr. Ware.
So on page 3 of 4 in your application, your comments on the response section, I believe the 3rd line down, detention to be part of future project. And then a little bit farther down, it kind of goes hand in hand per the master plan, 30 residents impacted by reducing peak flood elevations. And again, it calls out future detention. Do the new culverts not fix the problem now, or is it mandatory that you have to have detention later on down the road to fix this?
The future detention will complement this. This will resolve the issues described in the application, including any overtopping of these roadways, which is another public safety matter. The future detention that we have on our master plan is going to be south of 30.
Which is probably part of a future larger master plan.
Correct.
Nothing else. Sure.
Any other questions for these fine folks? Outstanding. We're very appreciative of all the help, and we understand this is a long-range plan, and thank you for taking the time and answering our questions.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Mr. Repay, oh, they're gonna, is that also the Hickory Ridge apartment or is that a different one?
That's gonna be different, I think.
It's a different one.
You're gonna throw that to someone else, I believe.
Yeah, I don't know if I could share screen here again. Let me see here.
Matt, this is Thomas. I got a presentation if you want.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, this is Matt Lake again. Let me just introduce you. We got with us today Thomas Burke from Christopher Burke Engineering. This is our Hicker Ridge Lake Apartments Flood Control Improvements Project. The project is located east of Cleveland, north of 57th Avenue. We've done some preliminary work that Thomas will probably talk about with hydraulic modeling, topographic survey. And the one thing we're waiting on before we move towards full engineering was going to be getting an easement recorded and signed and recorded. And we received that just recently. So, so we felt comfortable moving forward with the submittal to you guys. We're looking at design, engineering, and permitting. Again, we're looking at 50% of the design and permitting costs. The cost total is $162,000. We're asking for $81,000. Overall, this project we anticipate will be about $2.2 million. And again, I'm going to be using American Rescue Plan money that we received from the town as part of our cost share for this. And with that, I'll let Thomas take it away.
All right, thanks, Matt. Share my screen.
Mr. Burke, please do the introduction thing for the whole record, please.
Thomas Burke with Christopher Burke Engineering, working with the town of Maryville on these Hickory Ridge apartment flood control improvements.
Thank you.
Welcome. Oh, just kind of give you an idea where it's at in Maryville, US 30 in the bottom, I-65 over in the right. This is right off of Cleveland, kind of in the center area there. The as far as what's going on right now, there's 12 apartment buildings that have multiple units that have flooded multiple times during heavy rain events. The flood of there's area that comes from the northwest, over 200 acres. There's also Meadowdale Lateral that is immediately to the east of this Hickory Ridge apartment building that will can cause water to back up into this area. It has a detention pond built a long time ago, doesn't meet today's requirements. We also have an area on Cleveland Avenue at 56th and Grant that will flood. Meadowdale Lateral itself does not have mapped floodplain, but it has 5 square miles that are coming through there. This is a picture of the close-up of the Hickory Ridge apartment complex. The blue arrows on the top show the offsite area that's coming towards Hickory Ridge, trying to flow around it, but what happens today is it flows through it. If to the right is just to the right of the screen is Meadowdale Lateral. And this shows what the proposed improvements are. In the red here is a flood control berm that's meant to protect, tie to higher ground and protect these 12 apartment buildings from the flooding that could occur either from offsite area coming from the west, as well as the connection to Meadowdale Lateral to the east that can back up and flow there. We're proposing a pump station that's shown here in green. We're also proposing a backflow preventer, as well as detention, over 8 acre-feet of detention that's meant to slow down the water so that we're not exacerbating problems on Meadowdale Lateral. We've done some initial modeling and some initial calculations to get to this point, but that is the overall project. Along with to help with the flooding on Cleveland, we're improving conveyance across under Cleveland into this detention pond. It also helps with localized flooding over here. So those are the main components of the project that we're looking at designing. It's conceptual right now. As I mentioned, 8.4 acre-feet, trying to control 206 acres, reduce the sedimentation, improve the 12 apartment buildings and multiple units in those apartment buildings from flooding, improve water quality, wildlife habitat, recreation. And this is also part of the 2014 Maryville Stormwater Master Plan. As Matt mentioned, the easement has been acquired by the town. We'd have to get core permits, DNR permits, and IDEM permits. Completed preliminary engineering, easements, topographic surveys, some hydraulic modeling, and a right of entry construction agreement. As far as the cost goes, anticipated design and permitting cost is $162,000. The request is for 50% of that, or $81,000, to be split with the town. And the overall project cost, based on conceptual, is about $2.3 million. That includes a sizable contingency, design engineering, construction engineering, and permitting. This is just some of the things that are part of that 2.3 million that we anticipate, which is the pump station, a lot of storm sewers, a lot of excavation, etc. Questions?
All right, back to the board. Any questions for these gentlemen? I'll have one. It might be for Mr. Lake. I mean, for the town of Maryville, you know, we've been talking and doing a lot of different work. Is there an overview that you could also include in your submittals as it relates to how they're tying all together and how we're looking at the progression to try to take care of all this stuff, say north of 61st Street or all around Turkey Creek, just to help us kind of keep track of what you're all doing and how those are going, because this is all, you know, water knows no geographical boundaries, as we talked before. So that would be helpful. Also, you know, I don't know if it's at this phase or, you know, later, but also with regards to the maintenance of all this stuff and how that's going to work, especially when I see pump stations. That's the first thing that we're looking at doing, because have those dollars associated with making sure we're on top of the things that need to be maintained. So things like 2008 don't happen again.
Yeah, with regards to how all this fits in the big picture, we could also include the study that we did in Gary and the regional attention that we had identified that's needed up in that area as well. We just finished this past year, last year, the regional Meadowdale basins that you guys had, again, funded 50% of the construction costs. So that's all in. So yeah, we have made a lot of progress.
Right, and the progression though, Matt, though, would be helpful is just maps, you know, just on how that flow goes, instead of giving me another 73 reams of paper to read.
Yes.
Right? So then here's the kind of the things that we've been progressing. Here's what we've got to next. And then we're also going to have some idea of maybe being able to help as things come up on what other things are going on to look at the next progression of projects.
Yes, and with respects to maintenance too, that was part of the easement agreement. As you can imagine, there are a lot of attorneys involved. So we would be responsible for a portion of the maintenance of this particular basin, and they would share in the cost and some of the maintenance of the pump station and things like that.
Now, is the owner of the apartment complex involved in this, or is this strictly a municipal project?
Yeah, and that was the challenge. You know, this was a high priority project for us, but it was hard to nail down because ownerships change and things like that. And then we were making progress on getting the easement before ownership changes. So now we got to go back to step one and have the meetings and keep going through the process. And so this is a high priority project for us, but I didn't feel comfortable moving forward with anything until we had the property secured. Otherwise, it really can't become reality until that happens. So, and that's why we're at this point today.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Ware?
Yeah, I guess a question about, I thought I saw 24-inch culverts you were going to install. Does that take into consideration future possible development on the west side of Cleveland? I mean, right now it's all farmland, but you have that included in the red shaded out area. At some point, I'm sure it's going to be developed. Does that come into consideration in your engineering study?
I would anticipate given the ordinances of today, so that's taking existing flows that are going there. If that area west of Cleveland is developed, I would assume that they would have significant detention, at least to meet today's ordinance requirements, that would need less than a 24-inch, that based on detention requirements, they would be releasing less than what the existing release rate is. So I think a 24-inch would be sufficient.
Would be sufficient if that farm line was developed for residential.
However, it was developed and it provided the detention in accordance with today's standards.
And we do know that the owner of the property, the farmland, It is a hobby farm. It was purchased to be a hobby farm for many years to come. So I don't want to state the owner's name because I don't know if it's good on record or not.
All right, thank you.
Gentlemen, any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Mr. Gazdecki.
Matt, this is Tom Gazdecki. You indicate that there's a number of permits required, including one from the Army Corps. What is that? Well, how are they involved?
I'm sure we'll need a 404 because of, this tributary, because we are impacting a water of the US. So meaning lateral 6 as well, because we're going to be running this water into lateral 6. And there's a bit of channelization to the north. It doesn't look like it on the exhibit here, but that's channelized a bit. So they may claim jurisdiction on that as a water of the US. So it's going to be up to them to make that jurisdictional determination, but that's what we anticipate.
Okay, thank you. And then would you also do me a favor and just clarify this budget of 162,000? It would be in addition to the 2.23 million. Is that true?
Yeah, well, right now, this is just for engineering and permitting. After that, the construction cost is estimated about 2.3 million.
And the value you have assigned for design engineering and construction engineering is strictly for that 2.23 portion of the work, not this portion of the work. I'm confused by your
Correct.
15% or so, 18% from permitting and engineering on your budget. Is that 380,000 inclusive of this 162 or in addition to?
So the 162 is just to take this from concept through design and permitting. Okay, I see your question is not because you have permitting here as far as the 2.3.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So you're correct that there is some overlap when we include design engineering and permitting as part of that 2.3, but I mean, what's overriding anything is 25% contingency because it's conceptual design right now. So you are correct that there is some redundancy between the 162 is part of these two numbers.
Okay. And then one more favor, and this isn't really, I don't think, related to this application, but would you be able to provide us a breakout of those four major cost components? The control berm being one, the pump station being another, the storage basin being the third, and then the Hickory Ridge storm sewer improvements being the fourth.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right.
The last application is going to be the town of Dyer Ditch with Hart Ditch Stream Bank Stabilization. Thomas, are you going to be doing that or is someone from the town of Dyer? Oh, there I see Brian.
Brian's here. Yeah, I'm going to be doing that one. If I can share again. 1 second. This project deals with Hart Ditch and Dyer Ditch.
I'm sorry, can you help me with my Robert's Rules of Order in identifying yourself, please, under this new agenda item?
Absolutely. Thomas Burke with Christopher Burke Engineering, representing the town of Dyer Stormwater Management Board. Also here is Brian Lane with the town of Dyer Stormwater Administrator.
Thank you.
Certainly. So this has to do with Hart Ditch and Dyer Ditch doing some stream bank stabilization. The location of the projects is under and around 4 bridges, just highlighted where Briar Ridge is in relationship to surrounding communities. And this is a map of the map of the 4 locations inside Briar Ridge. So on the south side of the map is 213th Street. On the west side is Calumet Avenue. There are 2 locations on Killarney, one on Royal Dublin and one on Shannon. The one on Shannon is on Hart Ditch / Plum Creek, and the other 3 are on Dyer Ditch. to show you what it looks like, this is one of them where one of the bridges underneath it where the ditch has come up and started to undermine the structural portion of it. There's also, this used to be full of riprap. I believe some of the riprap that was originally placed there is washed away and might have been too small. So we're trying to come in here and restabilize the banks as well as some of the adjacent areas. Here's another one where we have nearly vertical banks underneath the bridge, but this isn't uncommon for lots of areas along Hart Ditch, as you're well aware. Here's just another view of it, of the very steep eroded banks, the sandy soils that we're encountering. It's jumping on me, sorry. So, and just another one. So when we are doing this project, we're looking not just underneath the bridge, but tying in the Hart Ditch upstream and downstream to where we have some stabilized banks. So the project benefit is the stabilization that's being done, as well as the reduction in downstream erosion. We know that Hart Ditch is carrying a lot of sediment downstream to Little Cal. The more we can stop that sediment, the better off we're going to be, which will also improve water quality. Shannon Bridge is probably one of the worst case ones where instead of just placing riprap, larger riprap to protect it, we're going to actually use this thing called scour lock, which should be a more green way of addressing some of the erosion that's going on there. It allows it where we can have a one-to-one slope, and also can help deal with high energy flows, which we're encountering in this location. Just to give you an idea, they come out here, they fill it either with stone or dirt, and they're basically, they set these up on site. They're relatively easy to install. They tie back into the bank, which isn't shown here, but they're tied back into it. Eventually, you can have vegetation grow through there, and this will be what it'll look like at Shannon, where there's going to be 2 sets of these scour lock installed. The request is for $81,000, which is about 1/3 of the total cost. The estimated cost of the project is $245,000, which includes a 15% contingency. The request is for 1/3, as I mentioned. Briar Ridge Property Owners Association will be paying 1/3, and the Lake County Drainage Board, because it's a regulated drain, has agreed to pay 1/3 of the cost, as well as do the bidding for the project and oversee the contractor. The long-term maintenance needs will be the responsibility of the surveyor's office, since they're both regulated drains. Just an idea of what the costs, most of them are going with riprap, so there's quite a bit of riprap. There's the scour lock that's being used, maintenance of traffic over the bridges, clearing grubbing, etc. So, any questions?
All right, back to the board of questions. Gentlemen?
Yes, this is Tom Gazdecki. If you received funding, how soon would they start?
It's going to be, we haven't gone out for bid, so we'd have to go out for bid, which would take probably a month of advertisement, another month to award it, so probably a couple months out. We'd also submit to DNR what the project is, and I don't know that they're going to issue a project permit within a couple months, so probably it's this summer.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on the scour lock. You mentioned that vegetation comes through that, and a lot of locations that we're doing maintenance on, we're afraid of vegetation coming through the system. It's something that you're wanting.
I'm wanting from a water quality standpoint that if you had some vegetation, it certainly has more benefit than just having some of the riprap that it flushes against.
Yeah, I understand, but I mean, vegetation is great, but sometimes it's phragmites, and that's not a good thing. So I'm just trying to get an understanding if you're going to try to grow things there, or are you doing that for aesthetics?
Well, I'm not suggesting we're intentionally growing anything there. I'm just saying that you could have grasses growing out of it. That's not the intention here. The intention is the structural stability of the bank, holding the bank back and underneath the bridge and adjacent to the bridges.
Oh, I understand that it's holding back the bank, but I'm also understanding too that where we live, people look at stuff. So is that the look that they would see when the finished product?
If they looked underneath the bridge, they would. But this is, again, you'd have to walk down around the bridge to see it because most of the traffic, I'm not aware of any pedestrian path across Shannon other than over the bridge
Yeah.
itself.
I mean, it might be 10, 15 yards, I don't know, it could be 200 yards, I don't know.
Is there a location where they've installed this or if this has been installed locally?
Have you guys put this system somewhere else in the area?
Not in the immediate area, no.
So this is new.
Yes, it would be new for us using it here. We've used it in the Chicagoland area, but not here.
And this particular location or this particular project was chosen because of that it's just under a bridge, you don't see it?
No, it was chosen because it gives us, it does not, we have nearly vertical slopes here. And if we're going to go with riprap, we don't want to go anything greater than 1.5, preferably 2 to 1. And so what we can accomplish with this is get our structural integrity without having to go far out in the channel or cut back the bridge more. So we're locked where the bridge has been placed, and we have to make sure we have the conveyance of the ditch itself, which has been eroding around some of the riprap that's there. So we want to get the structural integrity while not losing the conveyance of the channel itself.
I understand, thank you. I mean, is it with the amount of erosion loss, is there any repair to the erosion as a part of this, or are we just gonna reestablish the location as it is?
We're trying to, our goal to meet DNR requirements is to reestablish the way it was as best as possible. I mean, we know that when we put, so the other project we did similar to this was at Hart Street, also in Hart Ditch. And when we use those gabions baskets, which would accomplish the same thing as this, we were told by DNR that had we not already constructed the project, they would have made us, they wanted to make us tear them out and use something else. So this is kind of trying to say, here's another structural component that we can use.
Thank you.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
This is Ron Ware. So to follow up on that question, the commission partnered with the county and the town of Munster with the gabion wall, vertical construction like you're doing here, just north of 45th recently. If that, I mean, and that was a recent project that was vetted and approved. It seems like there's two different messages here. What you just said, DNR was talking to you about against the gabion construction, and that as opposed to what you're proposing here. And then my other question was, do you have the confirmation for the funding both from the POA and from the county already in place?
Let me start with the funding. Yes, the confirmation from the surveyor's office / drainage board has committed to the 1/3, 81,000, and the POA has committed to funding it as well. Regarding the 45th Street project, we designed that working with Little Cal and the surveyor's office, and those are very extensive gabion baskets that work very well given the limited area that we had to work in. I'm telling you what the latest correspondence from DNR was, which was this Hart Street bridge, or they work on Hart Street just west of Hart Street. And their comment that they actually put in writing saying that had it not already been constructed, we would never have allowed this, and we would prefer you to tear it out. They have changed the way what they approve and over the years, and this is the latest. I'm telling you what they're saying last year.
Is there a cost difference between the two? If so, how much as an estimate?
I would say the gabions are actually more expensive because of they're more time consuming to get the wires and the baskets tied together than these are. So if you're using gabions inside both of them, it would be close, but they would be more time consuming, more labor intensive with the baskets than these are.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question or a couple.
Yes, sir. Mr. Broadnax.
Thank you. You talked about 1-to-1 slope, but this looks more like a vertical slope. Is this okay to do like you show, like this picture is showing?
Yes, and that's why this is part of their specs is that you can put it in. So this is, you can see we're still going with some gabion up on top, but it's on the bottom right over here is where there's gonna be 2 levels
Okay,
of this, where we can nearly go nearly vertical. I mean, I think the picture I showed previously
got it.
is what we're facing right now.
Right.
And so
Okay, and then,
I
and
don't want to,
basically it's kind of like a, sort of a, you said it's sort of a more greenway, so it's sort of a, I wouldn't say biodegradable, but a greenish basket that you're filling with dirt or rocks or something.
correct.
So structurally, I would think, I don't know, is it topped with some sort of like light concrete or cementitious material, or it seems like the structural integrity is all tied into the tieback. So I wanted to see how it tied back into the earth.
You're correct. There's two things with it. It's tied back here, as well as the foundation for, if you want to call it that, same thing we use for the Gabions baskets. We still put a stone base to it so that this will stop the overturning, but we've also seen it or just pushed out. So there's 2 components to that we've looked at to make sure it's not going to move.
So what is that, just like a T-bar or something like that? And how does it grab onto that mesh basket?
So on the mesh basket,
Yeah, that piece right there.
right, it's much wider than any of the openings that you can see. I'm just going to go back to the picture of it. Sorry. It's much wider than any of the openings that you can see here. So it
Right.
hold on to, I don't know if it's foot around, 2 foot around, but then it's going back, it has to be anchored into solid ground behind it. So,
And I'm sure there's a specification for how far it has to be tied
absolutely
back in, like it's like 4 or 5 feet long or something.
correct. It's longer than that, but yes, correct.
Okay. And what is it made of? Is it metal or?
No, it's steel with a clamp on the back of it so that you push it into the point specified by the specifications, and then as
Okay,
you
by the
turn it
man.
back,
Gotcha.
it opens up and grabs it.
Oh, just like a wall anchor.
Correct.
All right. One other last question. You mentioned something about it improves water quality too. Do we have an issue with water quality here, or is that just an added benefit?
Added benefit.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
You. Any other questions, Mr. Wisniewski, you good?
Yeah, I got one.
All right.
What's the reasoning behind this rather than like a poured concrete apron under the bridges?
Trying to anticipate and satisfy DNR requirements.
Would they have an issue with a poured concrete apron versus what you're trying to do here?
They have an issue with the hard armoring that we know works well and has stood up in time. They've certainly come out clear that they have an issue with the way that they would like to see something softer, greener than what we've been using.
Are they familiar with this tributary and the amount of volume that comes through here?
They are. They should be well aware of it after all the work that's been done and continues. It has to be done. I don't know that. Unfortunately, I don't think that's their concern.
The silt that's
We're
traveling
thinking
through
offline, I'm
here,
just knowing that this is a different perspective. It's definitely a pivot point because, you know, I mean, we have to go through the rest of this system and we have an ongoing project for hard pitch the entire way. And this is just one step in that whole big picture project. And now I'm starting to get the vibe that we're changing up some of the things. And I just want to make sure we have some understanding of what they're trying to accomplish. Because as we go further north, we're going to have bigger and bigger issues as it relates to volume and severity of the slope.
Completely agree. And there are some places where, especially as you get by Ridge Road on the east side there, you're going to have to do something structural that just, I don't even believe something like this would work. So
Yeah,
I completely,
absolutely. I mean, if they're in, please keep Dan Repay involved as far as what kind of, feedback you're getting, because between the county and municipalities that are along hard pitch, we need to be able to have a unified effort to make sure we're getting some consistent feedback as we try to do a multi-year project here.
understood. Will do.
plus all the silt that travels all the way north, Bill, that keeps making that island that they won't let us remove.
It's all coming from here, Wishlinski.
Well, some of it is.
All right, any other questions, gentlemen?
Yes.
Mr. Gazeki.
What's the maximum height of this scour lock system? Can you stack it?
Yes, you stack it. And I don't know if they've done 5 high. I've seen 3 high, but they have the specifications, which I can pull up if you want, have different requirements as the higher you go. Just like when we, like when we do the Gabion baskets and depending on how high we go, the 45th was a really good example of one that's at least 5 high in some places along that. So
And then the
no, we're talking about 2 here.
We're good as long as it's stackable. And then the second question I have is, can you change the composition of the fill material to make it less, to make it still a hardscape and less permeable, less vegetative?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you for your help, gentlemen. Outstanding. All right, moving right along. Next up is other issues, new business.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve Amendment 2 of the United States Geological Survey Standard Joint Funding Agreement pending legal review.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second, Mr. Repay.
Over the years, the USGS has become really interested in the natural spring. This amendment allows them to monitor it and tell the age and check the aquifer and the sources. And this is no cost to us. It's federal dollars that we have no match to. And it's just an amendment to our normal gauge station agreement. So our attorney has looked at it, reviewed it, and has no issues with it.
Right. Thank you. Any discussion? Either none. Mrs. Lambert, motion and a second.
Thomas Dodge,
Yes.
Tom Gazeki,
Yes.
Anthony Rogers,
Yes.
Derek Nivett,
Yes.
Dave Castellanos,
Yes.
Ron Ware,
Yes.
Robert Ochi,
Yes.
Levon Whitaker,
Yes.
William Baker.
Yes. All right, passes. More things, you like it. Next up,
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to authorize our executive director to advertise for bids in the Natural Spring Park project that will begin in Gary, that would benefit the whole Northwest Indiana community.
there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second, Mr. Repay.
We had put this out for bid last year. There was some issues that popped up for the quality standpoint that delayed it. Those issues have been resolved. All of our permits are in order, and so we are ready to once again advertise for this project.
Got it. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Either none. Mrs. Lambert.
Thomas Dodge,
Yes.
Tom Gazeki,
Yes.
Anthony Rogers,
Enthusiastic, yes.
Derek Nivett,
Yes.
Dave Castellanos,
Definitely, yes.
Ron Ware,
Yes.
Robert Ochi,
Yes.
Levon Whitaker,
Yes.
William Baker.
Yes. Next up, my favorite part, statements to the board from the floor. If you have something to help us make it a better place to live, please come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and let's go. Yes, sir.
You ought to know who I am by now, Jerry Lee, 5997. I just wanted to ask Dan a question. He mentioned a study on Calhoun decline. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and tell me, will that take in the concerns that I have?
It will take in the ditch that you're speaking of. I don't know about it will take in your concerns, but there will be a study done for that area.
And what will that study, what will the point of that study be?
To check to see if there's any geotechnical or structural issues with that ditch, as
Okay.
instructed by the Corps.
That's what I want.
Yep. Look at that, Christmas in January.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Closed. All right, let's talk about the board. Anything to add for the good of the order, Mr. Ware?
I guess just thanks to everyone for the outstanding presentation. Thanks everyone for attending. And see you next month.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker.
Yes, thanks again, everyone, for attending. Try to stay warm, do your best to stay warm with the changing in the temperature. Make sure your families are well taken care of in that respect as well. Also, just want to elaborate on the fact that as a community, Northwest Indiana, Chicagoland, as a nation, as a state, I would certainly exercise just emphasizing everyone, just from a humanity standpoint, we have an obligation just as human beings made by God, created by God, to continue to do the right thing, look out for one another. And we see a lot of people, unfortunately, during this day and age in our country over a whole lot of things, everything from economics, race, education, income levels, where we stay. And it's certainly our responsibility as well as elected or non-elected representative type officials to make sure we do our part and spread the good news of God, but also hold each other, our communities accountable, and to make sure that we represent in a way that is humane in the best way that we can in terms of building our communities and building people, building each other in a way that is pleasing to God. So that being said, that's all I have to say, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Gazdecki.
I'd like to thank the presenters tonight. I thought they did an outstanding job, and thank you to the guests that are here, and we'll continue to try to make improvements to the system and keep on the straight and narrow path.
Thank you, Mr. Nimitz.
I'd also like to thank the presenters and the presentations, as well as the people that attended tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ochi.
Nothing, man.
Mr. Castellanos.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank for this past year, the services that provided by our illustrious staff of Dan Repay, Ms. Jodi Lambert, and our illustrious attorney, Mr. Whitman, for a fantastic job they did for us for this past year. Looking forward to working with you for this next year. Also, I'd like to compliment our board, considering echoing what our Commissioner Levon Whitaker just said, that this is an outstanding board here. And I hope the country can take note that we're the most diversified board in the state of Indiana that I can see. And we represent all political parties as well as different races. And one thing about us that I always echo on the radio program is that we work well together, and we respect each other's rights and to say what we need to say and believe in and what we need to believe in for the preservation of this country. Thank you, and Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you. Before we end, Mr. Repay, could you do me something? Thank you. Mr. Wishlinski.
Happy New Year and look forward to getting a lot of stuff done this year.
Mr. Broadnex.
I concur. Happy New Year. Thanks everyone for your participation, particularly the presenters today. Very good job. Thanks for making our part of the world, our little neck of the woods, a better place for us all. That's what we're all about.
Thank you. And then before we end, Mr. Repay, could you say something for the record about Mr. Oros? I mean, Emo?
Yeah, one of our contractors, Emo Popa, it worked for ARO, so he passed away last week. Unknown, still young, but definitely someone we trusted and used quite often to help with some projects. So always was there, local guy. It's a shame still trying to figure out how that business, if that business is going to keep going from here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. He was helpful for many, many years. Next meeting, always the third Wednesday of the month, which would be February 16th. Entertain a motion to adjourn, or we can stay for a little longer if you like.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? Second. Discussion? Mr. Wickland is making me do a roll call vote. Mrs. Lambert.
He wants to stay longer. What are you talking about?
Tom Wishlinski,
Yes.
Tom Gazdecki,
Yes.
Anthony Broadnex,
Another enthusiastic yes.
Jared Nimitz,
Yes.
Dave Castellanos,
Yes.
Ron Ware,
Yes.
Robert Ochi,
Yes.
Levon Whitaker,
Thank you, Attorney Whitman. Yes.
William Major.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Stay warm.